when you start looking into martial arts and you start putting it up against a mirror to religion, they are almost identical. It's scary.
What is up, combat sports fans? I am being joined by a very special guest, someone that I met at Karate Combat and immediately could tell he had great energy. Little did I know that he's had a YouTube channel that has been doing the Lord's work for over a decade now. It is McDojo Life. Rob, how are you doing? Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, dude, thank you for having me on. I love talking shop. I appreciate the good energy compliment. I'll take it.
Yes, I mean, I went through your YouTube page and I know that the goal is to keep martial arts legit by exposing the fakes, frauds, and phonies in the martial arts community while promoting the martial artists who are making a positive impact. And I saw on the Budo podcast that the story that kind of got you involved in this and how someone was like, well, why doesn't someone stop these McDojos from happening? And that kind of was the catalyst that got you to start your channel. But can you kind of, dive into where all this originated for you?
Yeah, I was basically it was pretty simple. I was teaching a class. I've been in the martial arts industry for about 25 years. So I started when I was 12 years old. It's the only real, I guess you could say, full-time job I've ever really known. And I was a blue belt at the time. I got brought into a jiu-jitsu academy. I loved working there. And then they were like, hey, would you be our striking coach? And so I started being the striking coach for their MMA program. And then after that, I got my way up to a blue belt, and I was assisting with classes and I was helping out behind the counter. And one day the boss called and it was like, hey man, I can't make it to teach class today. Would you do me a favor and teach class? And I was like, of course, man, I'll come teach class. So I taught class, and then after all that was done, it was a noon class. Everyone left except for one guy, and that guy, it was like his first or second class ever. We got on the subject of McDojos, and after everyone left, he pulled me off to the side and he goes, hey man, I'm a little embarrassed. I don't know what that means. And I kind of explained to him a little bit about what it meant, and he asked me a very simple question. He said, why doesn't anyone do anything about that? And I was like, damn, that's a good question. So I couldn't stop thinking about it the entire night. And then the next day I started McDojo.
Wow. And I know it started as just kind of articles, and it was hard to get any traction because it's hard for people, instant gratification to sit and read for a whole article of things. You transition kind of into the Facebook more video sphere. So how have you seen the success on the YouTube channel grow? Because now I know you're nearing almost 80K subscribers, very well deserved, but I'm sure it was maybe a slow burn there, or was it automatically just like whoosh?
No, super
A lot
slow
of
burn.
a lot of people.
What I tried to do at first on YouTube was I tried to do exactly on YouTube what I was doing on every other platform. The problem is that YouTube doesn't operate with the same policies and procedures. So when I would take a video like I do on Instagram and post it there, it would do fine. But if I take it and I put that on YouTube, it automatically got taken down for one reason or another. So I was like, well, I need to figure this out. So at first, I got hit with like 2 or 3 hard strikes. I think it was like, it got me to the point where they were like, if you get one more, we're going to take your channel down. So like for a year or two, I just didn't post anything. I just like stopped. Then I went back, I deleted literally everything I had ever posted on YouTube, which was all that short form content I posted on Instagram. I went back and started doing interviews several years back with some high profile people who had followed the page. I noticed the interviews were doing okay, but that wasn't really why people came to the channel. They came to the channel because of the fraudulent martial arts activity and those stories. So again, I let it go for like a year or two until I found a good, I guess you could say, structure of how to do that. Then after I found that structure, I've just been taking off with it. And now I'm pumping out videos like several times a week. I noticed that after doing the McDojo breakdowns, which is talking about the frauds and all the issues, that there were so many stories popping up like that were not making national news, but were important to our community, like pedophiles, people who would rip people off, people who had gotten murdered, like really darker side of what we do, but no one was talking about it. So once I started doing those stories too, my YouTube started just blowing up because it's just stories that it's just kind of being swept under the rug in one way or another.
Yeah, it's some serious journalistic work that you do. It made me curious, how do you come about seeing these stories? Like, do you subscribe to some type of BJJ platform? Is it at this point people just send you stuff? And if it is people just send you stuff at this point, how was it in the beginning? Like, how did you get this information that you were like, I need to cover this?
Well, the beginning, it's just like any other martial art. So even though it's a fraudulent martial art, or martial arts instructor, rather, usually the art itself is not the problem, but the teacher. but it's just like any other martial art. You just follow a lineage. So, for instance, there's a gentleman named George Dillman who believes he can knock people out with his chi without touching them, basically waving his hand and someone falls asleep 10 feet away, right? He has a lineage. He himself has instructors, and then under him, he has black belts. So once you find one instructor, all you have to do is just trace who they're teaching and who taught them, and it just opens up a rabbit hole of crazy. Just like any other martial art, if I wanted to learn about jujitsu, there's a lineage there, and I can follow that lineage and follow it back to the originator. But with fraudulent martial arts, it's no different. And now I'm fortunate enough that even though I have all that information of like what martial arts style these things happen in, what countries they're most likely to happen in, the different names of, like, for instance, Tenaga Dalam is something that you'll see in Indonesian Salat, which means inner power. And so those people believe they can knock people out with their mind too. Just call it something different. But now, luckily, I have so many people who support what I do. They send me a ton of stuff. And I'm so grateful for all the people who now keep an eye out, because now the whole goal was to have the community looking after each other. And now it seems they actually care. People actually send stuff in because they don't want people to be hurt or ripped off or taken advantage of. And so it's just huge to have that support and backing, because now what I feel like is the industry itself is going to regulate itself better, because now there's some type of standard of what we should not tolerate. It's been cool, man. It's been awesome.
Yes, it's definitely grown a community and an awareness about this. Just keeping that checks and balance within the martial arts community, I know, is like such a big thing for you. And I know you've talked about wanting to almost unsee some of the things that people send you, and how it can, you try to keep a very light tone on your page, because some of the stuff is just so grotesque or so disturbing that it would be hard to cover because it's just so bad. So how, from your perspective, do you kind of regulate what content you think should make the page? Like what becomes too much for you, or what is I guess the line that you like are like, okay, I can't cover this kind of content?
Well, I'll cover as much as the platforms will allow me to. I mean, there's just certain things, like you said, that I can't cover. Like, for instance, there have been cases of rape. There have been cases of gang rape, specifically out of certain martial arts schools. There have been cases of pedophilia. There all kinds of things, right? And I noticed YouTube will allow me to do like a story, to cover a story of a pedophile, but it will always be demonetized. So any of those stories that I do because it's the right thing to do, not because I'm going to make a dime off of them. Luckily, people support what I do. So we have like subscribers on YouTube and stuff like that. And those people who really go that extra mile are the ones that allow me to be able to cover those spaces where most of the time, because of the way that policies and procedures are on social media, they just wouldn't allow you to get away with that. Even the wording and how you word some things can get your entire page removed. So you have to really be careful, especially like TikTok is probably one of the strictest in terms of their policies and procedures. If I post anything martial arts related with a weapon, whether it be a stick, knife, gun, even if they're fake, TikTok removes them. Instagram is a little more light. They allow a little bit more, but Instagram doesn't like when you use things like tag somebody if, because they can treat that like bullying if it's misinterpreted. It's very strange. You have to kind of like walk a fine line. It's odd.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed like some, like if you're saying something sarcastically on Instagram, it might not register in the algorithm and they might take a post down or different things like that. But that's so interesting from like the monetization standpoint. I had no idea that certain things would get demonetized, because ultimately everyone gets into jujitsu or martial arts, whatever karate, whatever martial arts they want to get into, to feel a feeling of safeness. So it's kind of hard when you have moments like, for example, my first jujitsu tournament. I don't know if you saw the viral clip that went on, but it was at Jiu-Jitsu World League, and a girl was getting choked from the back, a rear naked choke, and she was like out for maybe 30 to 40 seconds. The referee didn't do like the normal things that people do where they check if she's still good. This isn't like ADCC. This is a, maybe blue belt at a highest tournament. And someone from the stands literally had to get up and stop the match because she was unconscious. And we had this whole fiasco of a girl like choking on her mouth guard and all this crazy stuff happening. So it's kind of hard for me, from someone who is a white belt about to compete for the first time, being like, do these referees know what they're doing? Like, I literally just almost saw a girl get choked to death when she was clearly out for like 40 to 45 seconds. Like, something really, really bad could have happened. Luckily, she didn't die. But you have to question, like, what is like the process that these referees do to be able to monitor these events?
Well, I mean, nine times out of 10, most referees are really good at their job. There are some occasions like that one. I've also seen the exact same thing happen in MMA where there was a gentleman who was being pushed up against the cage while he was underneath in side control, and he was getting caught with a Von Flue choke. And if someone is not as educated in what that looks like, it's basically just side control pressure with your shoulder, and it can cause someone to pass out. Well, he was in a position where he could not see what was going on, but everyone in the audience could. And they're screaming at him like, look, he's asleep, he's asleep. And he chose to ignore them. And that is more of a common sense issue than it is a training issue. That's somebody who should know that their entire job is specifically to keep people safe. And even if you wind up being the bad guy in that moment, if you save someone's life or you keep them safe, that is your job. And I think sometimes referees, under the pressure of people watching and screaming and yelling, can forget that. Sometimes I think referees feel pressured to be there for the amusement of the audience rather than the safety of the fighters. And that's where things get a little hectic. That's where people get seriously hurt. So I think most referees do a good job, man. I think that's one of the hardest jobs there is, especially under all that pressure, because fighters, they have a simple job. Keep fighting until someone tells you to stop. But like referees, they have to keep into account a lot of different things, especially the what might happen if. And sometimes audiences don't see that.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the hardest jobs, being a referee. I mean, you have some crazy things going on in matches. The reason why I was reminded of your channel was because it was brought up on an ADCC live chat by Mo. Basically, he was talking about his situation with Muslim, and he basically said that you did a great breakdown of the messy mess of him, just being a problem in the jiu-jitsu scene. So tell me, you're dealing with, these really big characters in the jiu-jitsu world, and you're getting some feedback from them, and it's not always positive. So one, how do you go about like just sliding into their DMs and like asking them for information? Do you give them like a forefront of like what you're doing? And then how do you react to like when they get a little aggressive with you?
Oh, like sometimes they get more than aggressive. I mean, over the years, I've had death threats. I've been threatened to be sued several times, which they never follow through because they can't. It'd be the easiest counter lawsuit ever. Thanks. If you ever did decide to sue me, anybody out there, feel free. I'm more than happy to counter sue and take your gym from you. So that'd be cool. But when it comes to, like, for instance, the Messi incident, right? And anybody who watched that breakdown that's on my YouTube channel, and I chose to call him Messi because anybody who acts like a complete ass in this industry, they're not going to get respect from me, not even on their name, because I think that respect is something that you should earn. And Messi went on to attack AJ Argazam a long time ago, a few years back. When he did that, that may or may not have been justified in one way or another because it looked like he did get head-butted, but you're a professional. Act like a professional. If somebody does something illegal in the ring, take advantage of that and say, yo, he headbutted me. Boom, match is over, you win. Instead, he loses his mind, throws a fit, slaps AJ, and then next thing you know, he's disqualified. Fast forward several years later, and here he is. He worked his way up through the ADCC trials. He beat 4 people, I do believe, some of the best athletes out there in jiu-jitsu to be able to make it to the finals. He winds up going against Big Dan. And then Big Dan beats him in like a minute, 30 seconds or something like that. It was something fairly embarrassing. After that, he was pretty cool. But then he decides, you know what? I still deserve to go to ADCC anyway. And Mo was like, no, you didn't win the trials, so you don't get to go. It's pretty simple structure, I think. So then rather than being a man and saying, you know what? I'll come back. I'll do it again next year. I'll do the best that I can. You know what? I placed second in the trials. That in itself is impressive. He goes on to make a racist rant against Mo and give Mo death threats, give him racist comments, and like go above and beyond to make sure that now not only is he not going to go to ADCC, he's now banned from all ADCC events ever. He threatens Big Dan afterwards. He slaps Big Dan's teammate. And then when I go to interview him, I say something as simple as, hey, I'm letting you know I'm doing a story about this. I'd be curious your side of things. Mostly he was pretty cool. But then he gives me death threats. He gives me racist comments. And I'm like, dude, that's the dumbest thing you could do. Literally reporting on this. Everything you're saying, I already said is going on record, you moron. So like, but that's a drop in the bucket. I do a story like that almost every day. It's nothing new. It's just sad that in an industry where it's all about integrity and honor and respect and all of these key words, that you have people like this who just don't get it. They think that it's about their own ego.
After you posted the video, did he go ghost on Instagram? Because I wasn't able to find his stuff.
I hope. I mean, it'd be nice if he wasn't spewing racist comments all over the place, but I mean, he's a grown man. He can do what he pleases. I mean, I think what happened was he didn't understand the gravity of what was happening in the moment. I think that his ego was blinding him from the consequences of where this was going. And rather than taking a step back as an adult and saying, you know what, I made a mistake, I apologize, he like doubled down and he was like saying weird things like, how do you know that was me? How do you know I said those things? I was like, you mean the screenshots?
That part was so funny.
Your name? And then he was like, I was like, you even gave me threats. And then like when I asked you if they were threats, he like backed down. I was like, dude, I've been threatened before. I know what this is like. By the way, anybody out there, if you're going to threaten me, go for the gusto. I want a good one. Give me something to write about. Don't you know?
Yeah, you got to really go for it when you're going for McDojo. But I have to say that one of my favorite pieces that you did was the Tara LaRosa versus Chris Zielinski one. But I want to know which one is your favorite. I like this one just because it was like some guy, some troll saying that an untrained man can take on a girl that's trained, and then it completely ended in the way that I think most trained people would expect. But what would be your favorite piece that you've made?
That was like a huge story when that happened too. That went like
Yeah.
viral, like #1 story on Reddit. I think my favorite is probably the story of Edon Abelnick. Edon Abelnick runs a thing called the Kala system. And it's basically just Krav Maga. He just calls it Kala and then refuses to give any acknowledgement that is literally Krav Maga because that's the only thing he's really ever trained. So he's basically just rebranded Krav Maga and called it something different. But he loves to abuse his students and try to make it seem like that's reality. There is definitely a difference between how you train people and how people will actually fight. And I think that when you train people, you should do that under safety first. And he's just like a crazy person. He lied about his resume online. He got caught by people who were actually in the military units that he claimed, who contacted me. He was illegally using firearms and filming on a gun range in South Africa. And got kicked off of that gun range. He shot a student doing gun disarms with live ammunition. He committed international fraud at least 3 or 4 times by saying that he was going to do seminars at different places in the world and then asked everyone to pay in full up front for these several day-long seminars, hundreds of dollars, and then never showed up. And then when people asked for a refund, he never gave the refund. All of this he admits to. All of it. He sets up multiple fights with different people, never shows up. But, you know, I think that's fairly childish. But at the end of the day, if you're going to say you're going to do it, you might as well follow through. But all of these things he admits to. And the fascinating part is no matter how many things he's admitted to, international fraud, illegal use of a firearm, shooting a student doing gun disarms with live ammunition, all of these things he's admitted to, but none of his students seem to get it. Like all of his students, once I put that out there, I had seen what they had done to other people. And it is 100% a legitimate cult. When you cannot see that your instructor is clearly taking advantage of you and you stick with them, even though they time and time again have shown nothing but negligence and fraud, you're in a cult. You're defending a cult leader who literally shot someone. And the beauty of it is that once I posted about him shooting a student, all of his cult members started coming on the page and they were like, oh, well, he hasn't done that since. And I was like, okay, you mean this video? And I found like 7 other videos with timestamps of him doing it clearly after he had already shot someone doing the same thing. So the ability for this man to be able to brainwash people at such an incredible level is almost impressive. And it's also extremely sad because he's literally abusing his students, and they think that it's good for them. That is quite literally the definition of Stockholm syndrome.
It's a crazy story. And I feel like the word cult, I feel like in that situation, like 100% a cult. But I also feel like sometimes people have used like that word and it's like kind of losing the meaning of it. And I think you really broke it down in a good way where you said basically if the instructor is teaching you something that benefits them more than it benefits you, then you're in a cult. But I remember when I was first getting into the whole jujitsu world and I was trying to figure out which gym to go to, I would be like, oh, well, I kind of only want to focus on no gi. Like I kind of really like 10 Planet. And I had two different people be like, oh, don't go there. It's a cult. So I feel like the word cult is kind of just being used as like a group of people. Like, couldn't you say then Gracie Baja is a cult? Like it's kind of like a team of people. So how do you kind of differentiate between that?
You nailed it on the head. It's something I've talked about quite a bit. Like when you start looking into martial arts and you start putting it up against a mirror to religion, they are almost identical. It's scary. Like if you think about going into a martial arts gym, regardless of the style, when you walk in, certain schools, not all, but certain schools make you bow at the door. They don't make you bow at the mat. So certain schools make you bow at the door and the mat, and certain schools only make you bow at the mat. Well, isn't Christianity very similar? Like if you go to a Catholic mass, all right, and you walk in, some have holy water right there, and you can kind of, for lack of better words, anoint yourself before you walk forward. And then there are pews. So usually people will take a knee at the pew and do the same thing, and then they sit down in the pew. Well, that's very similar to how we bow in and out of class. Well, how about we keep going down that path? There's usually one person at the head, and they're teaching us all a lesson while we all sit there and we watch the one person teach the lesson. Well, martial arts is the same way. There's one person at the front. We're all on the sidelines watching and observing what's going on. Past that, in martial arts, typically there's a picture of your instructor who came before the instructor and so on. The lineage is usually on the wall. Well, isn't in a Catholic church, usually there's Jesus Christ, whether it be a stained glass or a picture or a giant statue. Isn't that right behind the pastor or the preacher who's teaching the lesson? Sometime during jiu-jitsu, by the way, we all shake hands, usually at the end of class. Everybody shakes each other's hands. Good job. Well, what about that in Catholicism? We all stand up somewhere in the middle of mass and go, peace be with you and with you and with you, and everybody shakes hands. The similarities are scary. The only difference is one person's trying to teach you about religion. The other one's teaching you about self-defense. The only thing that stops any of those things from being a cult is what the intent of the leader is. If the intent of the leader in religion is to teach you religion, that's not for them. That's for you. They're giving. If the intent in martial arts is to teach you martial arts, that's not for them. That's for you. If the intent of the leader all of a sudden becomes more about them than it is about you, now you're in a cult. Because what happens is we wind up putting blinders on because we are so enamored with the leader that we want to do right by the leader and we forget to do right by us. And last little note about that, even in jiu-jitsu, there's a term called the crianche. And a crianche is basically a term that was used based off of a soap opera, like in Brazil. And it was a character, and he was like a traitor, like really scummy person. And that term has become a Brazilian jiu-jitsu term now for someone who just simply goes and trains at another gym. Like, how does that benefit? How does that hurt me if I go out and train at other gyms? It doesn't. It only benefits you. It only hurts the ego of the leader when they tell you you cannot go train in another gym. Then you're in a cult, or last, 100%. Sorry, I said last one, but then there's
I love
something like in jiu-jitsu, there's called the gauntlet, where people who are about to receive a belt promotion, there'll be a line of people on the left and a line of people on the right, and they will literally whip the person and make them walk down a line and walk back. I'm sorry, but if that is the standard for what does or does not create a next belt, then you can keep it. Like that has nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. It's not a traditional thing because when jiu-jitsu started, it didn't start with belts. And then even after it received belts, even after blue belts were incorporated and black belts were incorporated, then it still didn't have that. It wasn't until years later that some asshole decided that he wanted to just start whipping people. And then now people are so indoctrinated to think that that's normal behavior that if you explained it differently, they are literally allowing people to whip them for what? For a promotion that you were going to get anyway. So why do you need to be whipped? Like, I'm sorry, but if you whipping me, I'm whipping you back. That's just my personal philosophy.
Yeah, it's crazy some of the things that And the subtle ways that people can kind of benefit themselves as well. There's this writer on Twitter, Chris Wojcik. He's becoming a really great jujitsu competitor as well. He basically said that if your jujitsu coach forces you to only wear a certain gi that you can only buy from him, you are in a cult. So like maybe like little things like that, like you can't wear this color gi and then you also have to buy mine. Like those are like little things.
I disagree with that. I disagree wholeheartedly, because when you go to a football practice, what do you have to wear? Their uniform. When you go to baseball practice, what do you have to wear? Their uniform. Are those cults? No, that's a team. And so I don't see anything wrong with that. I think the only problem is that if you go and they lie to you about it, say, yeah, you can wear whatever you want. Then after you sign on the dotted line, they're like, hey, just letting you know that wasn't true. That's, to me, is different. If you go and you're well aware as an adult and you're making your own adult decision that is something you like the uniformity, you like that it's clean. For instance, maybe they want you to wear white gi. Well, maybe they want you to wear a white gi because they have white mats. And if you wear any other color, you're going to stain their mats. Like there's tons of reasons to do something like a uniform dress code. I don't see anything wrong with that. I think the problem is that they lie to you about it. Then there's an issue.
Yes, 100% makes sense. And crazy that there's so many different gyms and you're doing basically the work to call them out on all the crazy stuff. I know we only have 5 minutes left in my free Zoom. Sorry, I downgraded. I don't have the premium anymore. I'm going to be switching streaming services. But I want to give you a chance to talk about what you have coming up, because when I first met you, you were talking about this documentary that you have coming out. So I know there's news on that. Please, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. So we've been working on a documentary. We started crowdfunding before COVID. Obviously, we didn't know COVID was going to happen. So once we were able to get our crowdfunding up, from the time we had the idea to the time we actually raised the funds, it took about 6 months total. Then we were like, all right, well, now all of the crew has to be prepared to film. We were like, all right, we set a time and date out, which was about another 6 months out from our original crowdfunding. Then COVID hit like a couple months beforehand. So if anybody remembers COVID, a lot of schools, martial arts schools, had shut down during that time. And so we had to wait. So we waited about 2 years because COVID lockdowns were coming and then they were going. We had to organize a crew. It's not easy to film something that scale. So then finally last year, January through March, we were able to film for 3 months straight. We have a ton of footage. Then we went ahead and got a director, a legitimate director. He showed us a whole bunch of things that we could do with this and opened up a ton of doors. We're now represented by a company called UTA, which is one of the top talent agencies in the world. Now that we have an agent working for us, they were able to get us in contact with Hulu and Amazon. Hulu did pass on the project, but Amazon is still extremely interested. They want us to come back to the table with a few tweaks and see if that'll fit. So we think that that's good. We have an extremely famous Navy SEAL who we're waiting on signing a piece of paper, who's going to be an executive producer. And then once he's done signing that paperwork, I can make that announcement. And then no matter what, me and the team have decided it's coming out this year, no matter what happens. So our goal is to try to get it out on Amazon, hopefully as a series, but we want to do the full movie and we want to try to put that out in film festivals as well.
Awesome. Well, I cannot wait for it to come out. And if you're interested in learning more about this, you can obviously follow him at McDojo Life. And also there's the McDojo Life documentary. It's private. You can get access to it by giving, I guess, is it like a Venmo page or to say what?
Yeah, it's just a donation on PayPal. So the only reason we even have that still up is because so many people asked us after the fact if they can join, but that was only made as a perk for people who donated originally. So we felt like it'd be a slap in the face to the people who donated if we literally gave it out for free for something that was a perk. So all we did was just say, hey, if you want to donate, just donate whatever, and then you can get right into the page. I had a guy one time like be an ass and he donated a penny and I just refunded him. I'm like, that's a slap in my face. So like, no, I'm not going to let you in if you donate a penny. But people donate like $1, $5, I don't care. But that goes a long way in terms of having people being able to have access for something that other people had to pay for. I'm not just going to give it out for free.
100%. You're at a point of your career where you deserve to be getting something out of it. So I'm so happy for you, for your channel, for the documentary coming out. And thank you so much for taking the time. And hopefully see you at the next Karate Combat event.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like it might be in Miami as far as I'm looking at what Adam's saying. So if it's in Miami, I can drive to that too. So I think it's dope.
Yes, sounds good. All right. Take care, Rob.
Later.